Welcome back to the 5J5 Studio. I'm Parametric Phil, and this is episode 4. Where's the... Okay, it was a little late. Anyways, this is episode 4 of Rhino Fundamentals. Can we do that? No, okay. Anyways, let's jump into it. Basically, what we're going to be looking into is how do we modify geometry. So in the last episode, we looked at how to kind of build geometry, how we call up commands to start to build the basics of our forms. And now we're going to talk about a few general procedures about how to modify that geometry, and maybe it will help us get it closer to the final forms that we're looking for. So let's jump into it. Okay, so the first, the most basic type of modification is when we have curves, polycurves, any type of surfaces, we can manipulate the points on these surfaces, and there's a few different ways we can do that. We can click and drag it. Most of the time I have that setting turned off because I don't like using that option. We can use gumball if we want to. I don't use gumball either, but I'm just letting you know that these are some options that we can use to modify geometry, to move points and to move anything around. And the gumball will attach to any point that we have selected, and we can also rotate. I don't like using gumball, but that's up to you to decide. Personally, I like to use hotkeys, and when I click a point, I have a hotkey to activate the move command, and then I click the point, and then I move it wherever I want to. And on that note, I'm gonna have a different video on hotkeys that will go more into this, but I have another hotkey so that when I press a similar hotkey, it will pull up move point. It will pull up move point, and then it will add vertical equals yes. So now I only move in the vertical axis. So I like using hotkeys because I find it to be the most efficient modeling process. But anyways, the general point here is that we can pull up the move command, and we can move points around to refine the shape of our curve. But we can also do that with surfaces. So a plane, from the default plane, has 4 points, and we can start moving those points around if that's what we're trying to do. And if anything, I want to demonstrate that there's always multiple ways to generate a shape, and I'm going to use this shape as an example. So to get to a form like this, there's 2 ways that I think of it in my head. There's 2 ways, and you have to decide at any point. You have to decide what you think will be the most efficient path to take, and you never really know what will be the best path, but you'll get better at making that decision. So if I'm thinking about this kind of form in my head, one method that I could use is to create a flat plane first, and then I can use the control points, because this has a bunch of control points, and I could just maneuver these control points the same way that they are here. But when I click on control points on the surface, I don't have as many of them. So what's the deal there? Well, what we have to do is we have to rebuild this, and we already have a preview, and we have to rebuild this surface to have a higher point count. And so it's asking for our U and V point count, and we can think of a U and V as the coordinate system on the surface itself. So U and V is not the same as X and Y, but you can kind of think of it as an X and Y coordinate system on the surface. And so I don't want very many points in this direction, and because I really only want to get this kind of shape here. So I'm going to reduce the number of V points. I think that looks good. And then I only want a few U points also. Okay, and so now we've rebuilt that surface. We can turn our control points on. We can do something like this. Okay, so we've created a very similar looking surface, and then you can decide whether you want more control points, less control points, if you want to move them around more or less. There's a lot of other nuances to this, but I'm just kind of giving you an introduction. But the point is, there's another way that we could generate a similar surface. We could use, let's first just draw a rectangle to reference. Actually, I'll leave that there, because we're just imagining that we don't actually have this surface. This is just something in our head, and we're just looking at two different ways that we could generate a surface like that. So we could generate a control point curve, and I'm just going to put I'm going to put 5 points down here. So what I'm going to do is click the start point, and then I'm going to find the midpoint. I'm going to get that white point there by hitting control, and then now there's 2 points. I can also, I didn't want that one. The midpoint, and then now there's, and then I'm going to get a white point there. So now there's 2 points. I can find the midpoint between those two. And then I hit control twice to get rid of those white points. And I'm going to make 2 more. And then I can find the midpoint between those points. Okay, so now we have a control point with these 5 points here. And I'm going to grab that one. And I'm going to move this up like this. And so you see what's happening. It's a very similar curve to what's happening here. I'm going to explode this, and I'm just going to delete this, and I'm going to keep this curve, but I don't want it to go straight from here to here. So I'm going to draw another control point curve just as a reference. And I'm going to rebuild this to be 3. Actually, I'm going to rebuild this to have 2 more points. And I'm going to raise this one up a little bit to give it that bit of shape there. Okay. And now I'm going to do a sweep 2. I'm going to select this rail, and then select my cross-sectional curves, and then I can get a similar shape that way. And you can play with the settings depending on how complex you want that surface to be. So the point is, we took two totally different approaches to getting a very similar form, and just know that there's always many different ways that you can achieve a similar result, and over time you'll just learn what is the most efficient path to start on. Okay. So generally we were just talking about how we can move points. We can do that also with solid objects. Okay, what we can do is we can go solid point on right here, solid point on, and then it will turn on the points for our solid objects similar to a surface, and we can start editing solids the same way. Okay, so that's kind of the basics of how we can manipulate control points and solid points to modify our curves, surfaces, and solids. And let's move on to a few other concepts. Okay, so when it comes to curves, one thing that comes to mind is that if you need to extend the length of a curve, maybe you want this curve to follow its shape until it hits this straight line. We can type in extend curve, and then extend curve. Oh, it's just extend. We can stipulate, there's a few different ways we can do this. We can do a boundary object, and then we can click on the curve that we want to extend, and it's already extended to that boundary. Okay, the other way we can do it is we can select our curve and then select the end of the curve that we want to extend, and then we can decide this way what we want that distance of our extension to be. And when it comes to extend curve, we have other options. Again, guys, make sure you're checking the options. We can create straight segments if we want to. We can create arcs, or we can just choose smooth, and that will try to continue the curvature as best as possible. So that's an important command to use. Okay, here's another command that's really valuable for curves, surfaces, for any type of geometry. Scale 1D and scale 3D, I think, are going to be used a lot. So when it comes to scale 3D, I think that kind of makes sense. We can scale an object like this. Okay. But if we just want to, let's say I just want to change the dimension of this object in one dimension, then I can go to scale 1D, and then I can choose to change the direction of it like this. So, you know, this is an example. If we had if this was a building or something, if this was a floor plan or something like that, we might want to change the height of the building, and the best way to do that would just be to use a scale 1D component. Another command that I definitely need to talk about is the offset command. So let's say we're putting together a floor plan or something. You can take your curve, and then you can go to offset, and then in offset you can select, if you just type in any number now, it will change the offset distance, and you can choose which direction the offset is going in. And if you choose the inside, the inside or the outside, it will automatically extend the curves or trim the curves. And you can choose to change different options, like you can round over the corners, you know. So you have a lot of options here. You can put a chamfer on the corners. Okay, so now we have this floor plan idea going right now. This is a super important command. I really wish I knew this command when I was in architecture school, when I was making all these floor plans. Let's say we have a floor plan going, and so I'll just put in a few doors and windows and whatever. Okay, so we have, you know, the start of some kind of floor plan, and at this point I would start, you know, we can start trimming like this, and then we have to get in here and trim this stuff to make our floor plan work. This is a waste of time. You don't have to do this, okay? You don't have to do this. There's an easier way. As long as all your regions are closed, all we have to do is type in curve boolean, and we just have to choose, click the regions that you want to keep, and think about it as think about where you're putting your hatch. If this was a floor plan, where would you be putting your hatch? And for the options, I'm going to say delete all, and I'm going to combine regions, and I'm going to output curves. And now I'm just going to start clicking the regions that would be getting hatched, and it kind of gives you a preview of what it's going to look like. And now if we hit enter, boom, it's a final floor plan. Okay, so that's really important. Okay, that's really important. Okay, what else can we talk about? Okay, I'll just mention a few other like more complex solid editing tools. And guys, we've really only scratched the surface, but I'm just trying to give you a general sense of the tools that are out there. Okay, here's an example. Let's say we want to generate like an egg-shaped object. This is one way we could do it. So we could kind of generate a cross-sectional type shape of our egg. And then we can revolve it. 0 to 360. And so now we have this egg-shaped object. But let me show you another example of how there's multiple different ways to achieve similar geometry. We could take a sphere, and I'm going to make it about the same width. And now there's two ways to do this. We can take this sphere. Actually, there's only one way I want to do it. We can open up the control points, and we can just move the control points. We can just match this. Okay, so it's pretty similar. Okay, if we want it to be more similar, we could rebuild this to have more control points. Okay, so that's pretty similar. And this is another way that we could get a similar shape with the cage edit. Okay, so cage edit. We're gonna choose a bounding box around the world axis, and we're gonna do control points. We're gonna have 4 control points in all axes, and we're gonna choose global. And this is similar to when we had control points, but this will work with no matter what the object looks like. That's the key. This object could look like any form. It could have any amount of control points, but our cage edit will do the same thing. So we can generate a similar shape this way. So if we put more control points into this cage edit, probably would have worked better. But anyways, once you delete your cage edit, you can't go back and edit it. So you'll have to leave that there until you're sure you're done with it. But that's just that's getting into a little bit more advanced form editing, solid editing tools, and the cage edit works obviously in all dimensions. So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with the cage edit. So you can get into some weird solid editing tools. We have things like twist. Okay. There's better ways to make a helix if that's what you're trying to do, but this is just an example. You could twist any type of form. You can also bend. Careful, your computer might crash when you do something like this, depending on how complex the geometry is. So anyways, there are some other kind of more intense form editing tools. I hope I threw out a few interesting examples to get your mind thinking about better ways to start creating your geometry. Okay, so we're gonna call it on this episode. We covered a few interesting ways to modify geometry, and again, we're just scratching the surface. But I just want to throw out a few examples that come to mind as like things that I often go to, commands that I use most often, and certain procedures that I'm thinking about often. In the next episode, It's going to be similar to this one, but we're going to talk about different ways that we can do transformations. So like rotations, mirror, different arrays, and stuff like that. So I hope to see you in the next episode. I'm out.